I was finishing up The Line Becomes a River,
Mm.
and he name drops your book, right? And I don't know why I didn't think to look up that you wrote a book, right? And so this is Sunday, right? And I'm like, okay, he wrote a book. So I download Kindle, and I went through, anybody listening, watching, the book is The Land of Open Graves, Living and Dying on the Migrant Trail, right?
Yep.
When did you write that, by the way? Was it 2015, 16?
Came out at the end of 2015.
Okay. And I mean, it's a crazy book, right? It starts out as a straight. I mean, the beginning is a straight archaeology book, textbook, right? I'm like, I've never taken archaeology, but I can assume that you go into all the detail and jargon, and I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be rough because I'm not an archaeology student or anything.
Sure.
But then you get into the story of Lecho and Memo, and then it turns into this completely different narrative. I don't want to say gonzo, but it's gritty journalism. What Oscar Martinez in El Salvador calls gritty journalism. And but if you get through all the archaeology part, the first 100 pages or so, it really fleshes out, really lets you to appreciate the story of Lecho and Memo. And then it ends with a kind of a blend of both, right? Because then you go back to the archaeology. Again, I found you after watching the last episode of Immigration Nation. You came on, and I'm like, I didn't know anybody did that. And as soon as I saw that somebody was doing that, I'm like, I need to talk to this person. So first off, thank you for coming on. Why don't you introduce yourself to everybody and let everybody know what you do before we get into this conversation?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
My name is Jason De León. I am professor of anthropology and Chicano and Central American Studies at UCLA, and I am also the executive director of the Undocumented Migration Project, which is a long-term arts research education collective aimed at documenting and raising awareness about the experiences of migrants around the globe.
Yeah, and so I don't know why I didn't think somebody would be doing that, but I mean, what you're doing. I mean, as soon as I saw that last episode, I said that the last episode of that series, the whole series is great, but that last episode is almost great on its own, standalone, right? With the work you're doing and everything. And I just really got into the border for some reason, and I just read. I read Violent Borders. I read The Devil's Highway. This is all in the last 2 weeks. Line Becomes a River, and then your book, and then I'm going to reread the Beast, La Bestia, and because especially and after reading all those books, I'm not blowing smoke up your ass here. Your book really, really gets at what's really going on at the border, like you said. Like you talk about. Is what I'm doing here right? Because it's not straight archaeology. We're not talking about Pompeii here. We're talking about, you're coming on sites that you're saying, oh, these people might have ran away just now, right? And but I think maybe you'll tell me what your thoughts on it. But if I was going through that and to know that what's going on this border, thousands of people crossing the border, thousands. How many have died since 2000? Like almost 7,000 people, and that's only the people they find, right? It's better to know what's going on, right? And the way you're doing it scientifically. There's no, you can, I can guess at what you think of the politics, but you're not really bringing in the politics. You're saying the desert is part of our border security, and the border security apparatus is funneling people into this pit of death that if they survive, they get deported, and if they don't survive, they die. And now they're cleaning up the mess, right? They're cleaning up the garbage, quote unquote, so that there's no trace at all of what's going on, So how did you get into this? I mean, I know you studied archaeology, but where did you get into the border? When did your eye move towards the border?
It's funny. I think it was always there. I just didn't really understand it, or didn't really think about it as something that had been really sort of crucial to my upbringing, and something that I had always been kind of aware of, but never thought of as a subject of study. I went to school to become an archaeologist, I wanted to be an Egyptologist until I learned that I'd have to speak like 5 different languages. And I'm like, I struggle enough with English that there's no way I'm going to learn Greek or, Latin, whatever the hell else I'm required to do. So I got really interested in archaeology of Mexico. And that was because I had spent a lot of time in Mexico. I had family in Mexico. I spoke Spanish. There were all these things that excited me about it. But I grew up, I was an Army brat, and so we moved around a lot. But
McAllen, right?
I was in McAllen. I went to elementary school in McAllen, and then I moved to Long Beach, California when I was about 11. So I sort of claimed those 2 places. But McAllen, growing up, 8 miles from the border, we went back and forth all the time. And, the border was always something that I thought about, that was always present. Mexico was always an important part of my life. But when I went to graduate school, I wanted to work in Mexico and do archaeology. But I never really thought about immigration, even though, my parents had been immigrants. My grandparents had come from Mexico. My mom had come from the Philippines. I had lots of relatives who were undocumented. I had been going back and forth to Mexico and grew up along the border. All of those things were there, but I never thought about it as something that I should study. And it wasn't until I started doing archaeological work in Mexico and meeting people who were my same age, who had radically different experiences, crossing the border, trying to make ends meet, and people who were telling me these fucking horrific stories about their experiences that were utterly shocking to me. And I felt like, oh, well, as a semi-literate, brown person, I felt like I knew something about the border and about immigration, and it really showed me that I didn't know jack shit. That all of, I had a very, very basic, vague understanding of stuff. And so there was one guy in particular, a guy named Victor, who I got very close with around 2003 and 4 in central Mexico in a little pueblo called San Jose de la Laguna that's in the state of Tlaxcala. And he and I just got real close, became friends. He was working on this archaeological project with us. And he would just tell me crazy stories about almost dying in the Arizona desert, being kidnapped in Phoenix and held for ransom. And he was the first person that I really sort of heard those stories from. And then after that, it was like everybody that I met and became close with in Mexico had similar stories. And so I got to the point where I was like, look, do I want to spend the rest of my life studying, ancient stone tools, or is there something else that I can be doing that maybe I find more fulfilling? And so I just, I wrote a dissertation on ancient stone tools because I had to get it over with. And then I completely ran away from that and just started getting interested in, in border crossings and immigration. But I went into it totally blind. I did what you shouldn't do is I went to school for, 10 years to study this one topic. I got my PhD in that thing. And then within a week said, okay, I'm doing something radically different. And now I hope it's going to work out for the best. So that was a big, scary kind of leap for me. But I will say too, that at the same time, it was the first time that I felt like I could study something or be connected to something that was very personal, that I felt like I had a connection to. And it was the first time that I felt like being a brown person from a working class background who was connected to these issues in different ways, that was actually an asset, as opposed to my entire life where people had told me that being brown, being a first generation college student, all of those things were things I had to explain away and overcome as an impediment. People never said to me like, oh, the things that make you who you are can actually be a real asset for a career that you want to have. Never was I ever told that. So when I made this leap towards border studies, that was the first time I felt like really that maybe I was worth something, or my experiences were valuable in a new kind of way.
Yeah, just reading through the literature, the border literature, it comes up. It's a common topic that a lot of the border patrol people who are non-Latino or just the people in charge of the policy, they don't really seem to understand the people coming across the border as human beings, right? They're considered, bodies or treated like wildlife that's coming across the border. And as somebody who's studying, sites and artifacts that are left behind, when you pick up something, you're seeing something left behind by somebody that in your heart, your mind, your whatever, is somebody like somebody like in your family, somebody like in your friends, and that. On softball here, but would you say that gives you a one-up as a scientist, right? Like how Sotomayor said, my experiences are going to make me a better justice, Does your experience, does your knowledge of the culture and of Mexico, do you say give you a better experience, a better insight into what you're looking at on the border?
I don't know if it gives me better insight, because I feel like there's so many things that I just will never understand, like Latin American poverty, no matter how much you see it, or, even growing up as I did, kind of working class, and at different points in my life being at or below the poverty line. I still don't think I can ever comprehend what it's like to be so desperate, right? To be, like Chiapas poor or Honduras poor, where your only choice is to make that trek. So I feel like there are some things that I want to understand and that I'm empathetic towards, but I'll never really know that desperation. But what I will say that I think my own kind of background, what it does help with, I think is about accountability, because there are a lot of white academics who can study these issues who, for them, maybe some of it's not as personal. And so you can get away with doing certain things or saying writing certain things that I would feel utterly disgusted by. There's no way that I could treat this thing in this kind of distant sort of way, just because I feel like I've known enough, I'm close enough to people who have gone through this, that I have a lot of respect for those people and for the experience. And I think, for me, accountability as a privileged brown person who then gets to speak to the experiences of underprivileged brown people, I really take that seriously. And I think that can be a huge difference for a lot of folks. And people will say things like, well, if you come from a certain background, you can't study people who are like you because you're too close to it and you can't be objective and you can't be a scientist. And I think that's bullshit. I think all science is subjective.
Subjective, right.
In different kinds of ways.
We're human beings. I mean, we're not machines. We're not robots. We don't take in information as a robot.
And so I think I just embrace that and go, as a brown person who is in a position to try to raise awareness about the experiences of other brown people, take that privilege very seriously and feel, and have a level of responsibility that perhaps other folks, wouldn't have because of their background, because they can walk away from it. And right. I feel like I can't.
Right. I mean, and it's funny how you say you went into it blind. I mean, as a journalist, I've been reading about the border since, the late 2000s. I'm young. Late aughts, as they say. But it wasn't until I read, I've had a hell of a 2 weeks. I read, like I said, I read Devil's Highway, which is he has that great part. Everybody talks about it, where the steps of hypothermia, right? That's a great part. Yeah. And then you jump to your book and you talk about really what happens to you right after you die. So then you have this window. And then it really puts into relief, like, what is going on at the border? Because we hear these stories. When I was a kid, my friend David, he would tell me, oh, we swam across the river. And it was just a story. It was like an abstract thing. Oh, that's what happens at the border. And we really don't want to get, as a nation, into the nitty-gritty of what is really going on, that it's a machine of death, right? And, like, the great part about your book, and I don't want to... Anybody who really wants to get a really, like, visceral and full understanding of what's going on at the border really needs to get your book, Land of Open Graves. Because, you really, not only are you finding, the remains of people, like when you find Marcela's body, but, just the way you go about showing how the desert is not just, oh, they just died in the desert. Oh, well, like, that was a mistake. And you say maybe it was a mistake in the beginning, right? That they didn't know. But they know now, right? They've been knowing for 15 years that this is what the desert does. And they seem to think that it suits their purposes, right? Either it'll stop people from getting in, or we kill enough of them that that Latin America is not a problem. And that's really, you're talking about the desperation. I mean, that's reading your book. I mean, it gives me, in America, we have this whole thing of like, oh, despair. But you read the accounts of people who are just across the border in Nogales, Arizona, staring at Nogales, Nogales, Mexico, Sonora, staring at Nogales, Arizona, and thinking, how do I get there? And like that, they're the things that they, when they're going to the store to buy their supplies, and they've saved up how many weeks just for $26 worth of supplies. And that's the other thing, the great thing about your book is that you're an archaeologist, but you also, you go to Peru, right? Or was it Ecuador?
Ecuador.
You go to Ecuador. You're in New York. You're talking to families because that's the talk about your role as like, you know, archaeology meets anthropology meets. I mean, how you've created like this new kind of profession, really. I mean, I don't know anybody else doing that.
Well, for me, it really was about the narrative, and depending on the conversation, depending on the circle that I'm in, people will refer to the work as journalism in some way, shape, or form, and sometimes that's a really negative thing for some of my colleagues, and then other times,
but it's a good thing in your sense. You're documenting what's going on right now in our times, and that's a good form of journalism.
And for me, like, when I take the comment of journalism as a compliment, for me, it's like, oh, well, it just means that I'm really concerned about language and about narrative and about being nice to the reader, informing them in a way that they'll walk away from it with something, but also trying to keep a story that's compelling. And I think with the project, what ended up happening was I meet Memo and Lucho. I start, who are these two men who I watched cross the border in around 2009, and I just follow them around. I'm doing this ethnography. I'm working in a migrant shelter. I'm interviewing hundreds of people, but they become the people that I'm really close with for all kinds of reasons. And so I decide, okay, rather than interviewing 100 people for an hour each, I'm going to do a little bit of that, but I'm going to spend most of my time interviewing these two men because I think that their story is exemplary of these experiences of many others. And so I sort of follow them for a long time. And then the stuff with Maricela happens, the stuff with her nephew, Jose Maria Tacuri happens. And for me, it just made the most sense to, rather than like stopping in a certain place, to say, how far can I take this story? Because I want to know more on a personal level. And then how do I bring all that back and put it together so that you, the reader, can walk with me through these things and keep it cohesive? Because I think if you can keep it cohesive and engaging, people will want to get to the end. And you've done a little bit of a trick in that, like, well, I was sort of selling you the story that I thought you would be interested in, but at the same time, I've tried to educate you about a whole bunch of different things. So it's like you're sneaking the vegetables into the sauce kind of thing.
I was just talking about that. Yeah, I mean, and I'm gonna sound like a fool here. I mean, isn't that what archaeology is trying to do, right? You find something from a long time ago, traditional archaeology. You find something from a long time ago, and you try to find out the story of the person. Well, human archaeology, you're trying to find the story of the person who used it. You find a site. What was this site used for? Okay, let's check the debris. Let's check the garbage. what they left behind. And you're doing that now, and I think it's really important, especially at the the whole book. You're kind of in doubt of like, is what I'm doing the right thing? Because these are people who this is going on right now. It's not like Pompeii. It's not looking at the fossilized remains of people right there in the volcano blast. But as you point out at the end, there's this whole project to clean up the desert, right? So there's not going to be an archaeology of what's going on now in the future if these people have their way, right? And that would be the biggest crime for them to go through what they're going through, to have this machine of death, that they know it's a machine of death, and then for it to be erased completely, because then that means future societies won't be able to learn from what's going on right now. Because that's the other thing, right? We need to know what's going on, good or bad, as much as it makes us uncomfortable, as much as it breaks our heart, so that we can be better, so that we can build a better society, so we can keep our government to account for its policies, right?
Yeah. I mean, I worry that, people whitewash this history, and it won't even just be, white Americans who don't want to see the connection between Ellis Island and the Sonora Desert. This stuff is disappearing rapidly for all kinds of reasons, whether it's, the desert destroying migrant possessions or the bodies of people, but also, people don't have access to the stuff, don't get to see it, and I think we can easily forget about it. And I worry too. I mean, every generation we have some new set of immigrants that we can demonize. And you're already hearing Mexican Americans, demonizing Central Americans, right? That's this, like, as Mexican Americans become more affluent in the United States, they want to distance themselves from people that they think are below them. And you're already seeing this discrimination happening within Mexico against Central Americans.
Honduran to the New Mexicans, right?
Yeah. And I think, for me, this work is to keep that, is to fight against that narrative, to be like, no, you don't get to erase this, and it exists, and we're going to find all kinds of ways to keep it in people's memories, and also to not give you the sanitized version of it. You don't get to sanitize it. You don't get to rewrite it so that people will say, because people will say the bullshit like, oh, my ancestors came through Ellis Island and they worked really hard and it was a great experience and they learned English, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, motherfucker, if you were Italian, if you were Irish, if you were Eastern European, you were demonized, you were robbed, you were treated like shit, and it's only with a couple of generations of distance that now you can romanticize that experience.
You have that great quote of the guy who's writing about the immigrants in the slum of 5 Points, right? And he's talking about this is what, 1868? And the way he's describing European immigrants, we should say, is the way exactly they describe, immigrants now from quote unquote shithole countries, right? Your point is that the new wave of immigrants is always from a shithole country. Back in the day, it was Ireland and Italy, and now it just happens to be Mexico. Now it's turning into Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, and it'll be something else in the future, right? Not to jump topic too quick, but like how I'm reading about you in Nogales. I'm reading about you in all these border towns, and you're scared, right? I mean, how do you deal with that, right? Because as a journalist, I've always wanted to, even when I'm in Honduras and I'm with my family, I'm afraid, right? And my family, my grandma who was born there, my mom, they tell me to be afraid, to not go out at night, for the way, especially in Honduras, I'm like a head taller than everybody. I stick out like a sore thumb. I mean, how do you, are you ever afraid?
I don't think, with the Arizona stuff, the only time I was afraid were when I had difficult encounters with the Border Patrol, or when I got into trouble, out in the desert because I didn't have enough water or I was pushing myself sort of too much. I felt like for the most part, working with migrants, people are really respectful and protective of you if you're there, if you're like committed to being with them.
Right.
People were always sort of looking out for me. And as I'm working on a book right now on smugglers, which is a whole different kind of can of worms that has different sorts of dangers. And that's probably, if there's any work that I've done that has been scary, it's been a little bit of that work. But even working with smugglers and going to Honduras and spending all this time in southern Mexico, I find that I can't do the work unless I have a lot of trust with the people I'm working with, even if they're smugglers. Because, if I want to do the stuff that I want to do and get access to the stuff I want to do, I have to be really trusting of those folks, and then and they have to be trusting of me. So I haven't, it's scary occasionally, but it was more just like worrisome. And as you were saying in the book, there's a lot of moments in the book where I talk about, should I be doing this? Is this okay? And I didn't want to write a book, because you can read a lot of anthropological books, ethnographies on other people's experiences, where the writer just comes in and is very confident about what they're doing. I am the expert. These are my people, kind of thing. Let me tell you all about them. And I'm like, fuck that, man. I'm so scared that I'm going to screw up all the time. I'm going to someone's going to get hurt because of what I'm observing or writing about. And so I want the reader to know that this is a scary thing on a kind of personal level, because I worry that I'm going to do more harm than good, and I want to be accountable. And so that's why I'm always an overshare with this kind of stuff, because I think that we don't hear that enough. And I don't think that me oversharing about my anxiety undermines, some level of expertise. I think it makes me a human. And I think in some ways, when I read ethnographies that people are writing about other folks, I want to know, how are you doing this? Who are you talking to?
Right.
Do they like you? Do you like them? Are you committed to them on a personal level? Show me those things, because then it becomes more believable to me. Because I could easily write a book about migrants or about smugglers and do very little work. I can just make it all up, or I can give you this kind of superficial take on stuff, and then pretend that I've got it all figured out. And I've never had anything figured out. So for me, that's part of the journey is learning along the way and letting the reader, that I take you seriously. I want your bullshit meter. I want you to read my book and not have your bullshit meter kind of go off. I want you to know that I'm trying to be as honest as possible. But there's fear in that, in that kind of honesty. But I couldn't do it the other way.
It goes back to scientists trying to seem objective, right? I got to cut out my feelings, cut out what I'm feeling, so that when you read this, it'll be objective and you'll believe it. But that actually makes me not believe it, because I know that there's something, it's an iceberg. You're showing me the tip. If you show me all the subjective, show me all your doubts, show me that, am I doing this right? Then what you show me, the product of your work, then I can contextualize it and I can understand it more fully, right?
And I think, part of that comes with being a brown person trying to write about other brown people, is I'm not accountable. I'm not thinking about funders or students or my readers. I'm thinking about the people that I work with. They like me, right? They like what I'm doing. And am I going to do right by them in the end? Which I think, I don't think you have to be, you don't have to be a brown person to write about other brown people, but I just do think that no matter where you come from, you have to walk in the door with that level of personal accountability. And it, when you see it and when you read it, I think it's there. You can appreciate, like, these people actually give a shit and think about the stuff, and it's not just a job for them to write about these people, but they come in with these commitments that become obvious. And for me, that's what makes, like, the writing really good, or something that I want to, like, that I believe and trust.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has to read this book. I mean, we'll move to this human smuggling, and it's funny that you kind of touch on it, because it's with Christian's story, right? How he came to the United States. I mean, he took him months to get here, and he's being handed off, all along the way, and he comes into contact with narcos, right? When he's in that big house, and they turn on the lights, and there's hundreds of people laying down, right? That's obviously, and they're on some ranch, and I mean, so do you want to talk about, like, how the coyotes or polleros, I'm learning that they're called polleros, how that turned into human smuggling? I mean, it's the same thing that happened in the 80s, right? I mean, they're funneling drugs, and the government's like, hey, if you guys are smuggling drugs, can you smuggle guns back to Nicaragua for us, to the Contras? I mean, it's kind of the same thing. If the roots are there, and these people have the know-how to get across borders, then they'll carry anything, right? If it's people, if it's fucking drugs, they'll carry anything.
Yeah. Well, I think that a lot of Americans don't understand the interconnections between all this stuff, right? I mean, no. we have Mexican drug cartels because of the DEA. We have Mexican drug cartels because America has an insatiable appetite for cocaine and heroin and other sorts of things. So all these pieces are connected. And so, when people say, I'm going to build a wall, and you're like, what fucking mystical world do you live in where you think that a wall is going to solve these global problems?
That doesn't get rid of the demand for coke and all that shit.
Yeah. And so it's the same thing with, with human smuggling. I mean, smuggling is a global industry. It's a necessary industry because all these countries need cheap labor, whether it's the US or parts of Europe. We are fueling this industry, and smuggling has gotten so dangerous in the last 10 to 15 years, and a lot of it is linked, at least in Latin America, so much of it is linked up to US interventionist policies. And so the book that I'm working on right now follows a group of smugglers. All of them are Honduran, who are moving people across Mexico between 2015 and now. And the book begins right after this first big arrival of all of these unaccompanied minors from Honduras, largely. They show up in Texas in 2014. And at that time, Obama, there's bad optics on, like, little kids in cages. I mean, that was before America thought it was bad to have kids in cages, where now we just don't seem to give a shit.
Well, when Obama did it, it wasn't so bad.
Yeah. And then, of course, we're going to fix this whole thing. And he comes out and says, okay, we've solved the problem. We've secured the U.S.-Mexico border. These kids are no longer going to be coming. But we didn't do shit at the U.S.-Mexico border. We launched this program with Mexico called Plan Frontera Sur, which basically tries to harden the Guatemala border. And so these people from Central America, who before would take them a month to get from Chiapas to Nogales, they could hop on the top of a train, they could take a bus, but there wasn't a lot of security trying to slow them down. Obama puts this plan into place, and suddenly it starts getting really difficult to get across Mexico. And so you've got you now need a guide to get across Mexico. So MS-13 has, and all these other transnational gangs, I work mostly with MS-13 and with Bloods. They see, like, oh, hey, all of these Hondurans, need someone to escort them across Mexico so we can start making money off of that. So now you've got these people who are leaving Honduras because of MS-13, who now have to pay money to MS-13 to get them across Mexico. And so, of course, in the drug cartels see this as well. If you're coming through our territory, now we're gonna charge you a head tax. And so now MS-13 and the drug cartels are making a shit ton of money off of this rise in human movement across Mexico. And then, of course, Mexico is ramping up its security infrastructure, so people are getting fat pockets off of all of the detention centers that they're building.
Yeah, you said that Mexico now deports more Hondurans than the United States does.
Yeah, I mean that's a crazy thing, but they're deporting him at the behest of the U.S.
Right.
I mean, and part of like my, the beginning of this book I'm working on revolves around a conversation that I'm having with Honduran security agents in Honduras who are talking to me about how they can best catch unaccompanied minors and single parents, because you can't leave Honduras with one parent. You have to have both parents sign an affidavit, or both parents have to be present. And so these agents are talking about these death sentences. Like, look, I catch a teenager leaving San Pedro Sula and I send him back. I know what I'm sending him back to, right? There's people who are trying to kill him. But, it's illegal to leave the country, is what they tell me. And your government, the U.S., is helping us to do it. And people will say, well, that's bullshit. That's Honduras' problem. These meetings that I have in Honduras are facilitated by the U.S. Border Patrol. So I'm sitting in a room with the U.S. Border Patrol agent in Honduras, talking to these agents about this plan that is killing people, putting them into all kinds of difficult situations. And, I think America, we have to realize that all these pieces fit together. And you can't, if you want immigration reform, you need to help the stability of these countries,
right,
as opposed to all the security shit. We're just wasting money. But
the security, the emphasis on security is, again, they don't realize how desperate these people are. Like you said in the book, like that one Mexican said, for Mexicans, there's no border. We're going to go. We have to go. Like Maricela said, I don't know what my destiny is, but I'm going to go. I have to go. Like, they don't understand the desperation. And the other thing is, like with the Plan Frontera Sur, yeah, in the late, like you showed, in the late 90s, 2000s, the main obstacle course was the desert or the wall. And now Mexico itself, they just extended, Obama extends the obstacle course to include all of Mexico. If you can get through the jungle, if you can get through swamps, if you can get through various cartels and gangs, and then you reach the border, and then you got to get through the desert. And the other thing is this, you keep talking about in the book too, is what is it called? Areas of exception.
Oh, spaces of exception. Spaces
of exception, where Gitmo, people would know, or places where basically where the rules of regular morality don't exist.
No.
And the desert is one of those, right? And I think in the beginning of the book you compared to a concentration camp, right? That a concentration camp is an area of space of exception. But it's even better. The desert's even better than a concentration camp, because at a concentration camp you have bodies and you have to dispose of them, and blah, blah. The desert, as you show through your work, your body could be gone in a matter of days. And you show, you have those. Really, I can't believe you're the first person to do those experiments in the desert with like pig carcasses. What happens to a body? People find remains, but they don't know. Let's film a pig, because pigs are the most, human-like in their anatomy and the way they break down. You put them in clothes, you put stuff in their, you put letters in their pockets, and you see, okay, let's film this. Let's see exactly what happens. It's insane that people were dying on the border for so long and nobody knew that process and cared to know.
No. I think it just speaks to the lack of interest in this stuff for a long time, and I know, like, as a researcher, I think sometimes it's hard, like, I spend a lot of time talking to other border researchers. And so I just, I have to remind myself that, like, the little world that I exist in, where everybody is like really knowledgeable about these things, we are in the minority. Most people have no clue about any of this shit. And so the fact that there's been so little interest in, using science to understand elements of this experience that we just ignore or ignorant to, that was really eye-opening to me. And I'm just as surprised as you when I was like, wait, no one's done this? this is a pretty simple thing to do. And yeah, it's been happening for 20 years, and yet no one has been curious enough to try this. That really was mind-boggling for me in a lot of ways. But then it just was reminding me that, yeah, people don't give a shit about this stuff. And even when and we're living in this Trump era now, where I'm no longer naive. I think we all came out of the Obama era, hopeful and thinking about immigration reform as being on the cusp, but me also thinking that, like, hey, people in America aren't stupid or hateful. If they just knew more about this stuff, that they would care. And now, of course, I'm fucking dead wrong. People are hateful and ignorant, and they want to stay that way.
They want to stay that way.
No.
It's not really ignorance, it's stupidity, right? The willful ignorance.
Yeah. Like, you want to hear what you want to hear, and that's it. And so, I thought, well, God, once people know that people are dying, they're disappearing, we'll be outraged and this whole thing will stop. Of course, it's a naive perspective, because it's been happening for so long and people know about it and they just don't care. But I do think that we're in a moment too where America is starting to get a real taste of political instability, economic instability.
Like I said, we're becoming a Latin American country over here.
Oh yeah. I mean, we're run by a dictator. So you hope that people will start to realize, like, well, shit, where am I going to go when this reign of fascism really, takes hold? What country's going to take me? And you hope that if they can see that from their own perspective, then maybe they can start to also think about, well, shit, maybe that's what it's like in Honduras or in El Salvador.
I think you're being hopeful again. I mean, I feel the same way, right? I'm like, if we could just show people, they can put two and two together. But that, that two and two together, that's a big leap for people. That's a huge leap. And people are busy, like you said. People are busy. The system, whatever you want to call the system, keeps you busy. And so you might have 5 minutes to know about what's going on at the border and everything around the whole world. That doesn't give you enough to know who to pick as a leader, what our policy should be. You hear, oh, immigrants are coming for our jobs, and you don't know any better, and so you're scared. I mean, the government scares us the way it scares those migrants coming. Don't come here or you're gonna die.
Yeah.
And then tells us, don't let those immigrants come in here or else you're gonna die of starvation.
Yeah.
It's terrible. What was I gonna ask you? I mean, the other thing I want to, you're in a band, and I see, music back there. I mean, what kind of genre? I mean, what do you play?
Well, for a long time, I was in this like hardcore punk / reggae band, and then I gave up. I stopped playing music for a while, and then I picked it up again in graduate school and started playing, sort of like Americana kind of. I was real into bands like the Drive-By Truckers, Jason Isbell. Kind of late 70s Neil Young. I sing and play guitar and write songs, but the music, at least with the I was in this Americana band called the Wilcox Hotel, and that band was kind of this laboratory for me to start writing lyrics about border issues and all these things that I was like sort of becoming interested in, but didn't quite have the courage to switch kind of research gears. I think I first started writing about migrants and about smugglers in this band, and then started connecting the dots. But I don't play as much. I mean, I have two small kids, and so my guitar playing, my band is basically with a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, which is fun.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever used? I mean, I know in Latin America, I mean, guitar is, guitar. Everybody loves guitar, right? I mean, Have you ever been tempted to start playing a guitar? When you described very heartbreaking scenes, and when you're talking to Maricela's family, and you're like, I feel like an idiot. My words are stumbling out. I feel for you. Like I can't imagine. The work you do in the desert is hard enough, right? And then you got to go meet people and the things that the things that they say when. That's the violence. You talk about necro-violence, right? The violence to the body. And you said the worst thing that can happen to the body is that it's just gone. It just disappeared. And you show what happens to people's families. You show what happens, like, you ask them, you're telling them, I think we found their body, and they still don't believe it. No, they're going to come. That's not them. That's not them. And that's the most heartbreaking thing, because oh man, if they keep that, they're never going to heal. And so the way you show it, like what the U.S. government is doing with our border, not only destroys the lives that end there, but destroys the lives of people all over the world, in Ecuador, and in this country, people who are waiting for them, like in New York or wherever. Going back to the question, have you ever played? Has there ever been a time when you played in Mexico for people that you were following?
We did the Wilcox Hotel actually did a Mexico
Wilcox
tour.
Hotel? Is that Wilcox, like Chicago Wilcox?
No,
I'm from Chicago, so.
Yeah, no, there's an LA punk band called Fear, and they mentioned this, what's called the Wilcox Hotel, but it's actually a name for the jail on Wilcox Avenue in LA. So it comes from that. We did a Mexico tour in 2006, and went around playing, I think we played 10 shows across central and southern Mexico, which was a lot of fun. But I'll tell you a funny story about this. We ended up going. So my buddy Victor, who had inspired me to do this whole thing, to sort of switch gears to thinking about immigration, he lives in this little tiny town in Mexico. So we go out there, and they're like, "You come play at the ranch." So like, okay, we lug the band out there. They have this big party for us. We're playing in this. All these villages have the house next door that's only half finished because the person's in the U.S. and they're sending money back. So it's like there's like a cement room with rebar sticking on the top.
Yeah.
So they're like, "You guys are going to play in this room." And so we're playing some songs, and then they were like, "Oh, didn't you write a song about Victor?" And I was like, "Sure, yeah, I wrote the song about Victor. I'm going to play it for you." And then after the song is over, they were like, "Does he die in that song?" And I was like, well, I was taking some artistic license. Like it was basically, the song had been written from the perspective of a smuggler who takes his kid into the desert, and the kid dies, and then the smugglers are like conflicted. Like, should we leave him here? Should we go? Is it okay if we just take his shit and leave him in the desert? And so I wrote it from the perspective of these smugglers, and using my friend Victor's story as like the main character, but I used his name in the story. People were like, "What kind of fucking twisted at
Yeah.
And I had to explain, like, well, no, it was a really personal thing for me, because I think about him dying, and I think about these other folks dying, and it kills me. But I think there was something lost in that initial translation. But at the same time, I think a lot of folks there don't necessarily want to hear songs about migration.
I was going to say, for them, it's just too close, right? That's the other thing you get from your book, is that, man, are we fucking lucky to be born American? That we don't have to be, that I'm not in Honduras. I could have easily been born in Honduras, and like, what would I have done? You have to go. Every person you follow, they have to go. There's nothing, when who's it, Memo or Lecho, they're going through. Okay, how much is a pizza? $10. Oh man, that's a day's wage. How much is a pair of pants? 40 something. That's a week. That's a week wage. So you have to go. And the other thing is, if you're coming from Honduras and Chiapas, I forget who you had show up. It might have been the last kid. He shows up in black shoes, black pants, black shirt, black hat. And so this person doesn't know anything about the desert, doesn't understand how hot it's going to be. And again, anybody listening to this, watching this, has to pick up this book, Land of Open Graves, because again, I was researching books on the border, and I would have skipped it had it not been for Francisco Cantu mentioning you at the end of his book. What did you think about that? I was reading it, and then I read, I try to read what people say about it, and I saw that people were mad that, he's a Border Patrol person, what gives him the right to talk about this? But I'm like, no, I appreciate that. I didn't even know that a Border Patrol person had written a book. What did you think about that book?
I think he has been unfairly targeted by some people. We've never met. He and I have exchanged some emails. He seems like a very, very nice guy. And so I feel bad that, he's trying to write this story about his experiences as a Border Patrol agent. Right. And people, he's not taking a hard enough stance, for some people. And, you can't please everybody. But I'm like, look, there's a lot of books out there about the Border Patrol that are basically commercials for that fucking job. And this is a book that's not, you know. I think the biggest complaint I think people have had is he's not calling them out enough for the stuff that they're doing, which is fine. I mean,
Right.
but
That's
know,
always
but
true,
people,
though. They could always be true.
Yeah, people say that to me. I'm like, you know,
Yeah, I want to talk to you about that. You point out that people have a problem with what you're doing, right? That you shouldn't be doing it, which is weird. I mean, so what? Just what? Nobody should be looking at the artifacts being left by people who are dying now every day in the desert?
No. So I mean, we need more of that work, and I think that The Line Becomes a River is nice to be out there. Just, I mean, that's like the only game in town, you know, to read about those experiences. That isn't. I mean, there's a few other books, but I wouldn't recommend them. And so we need more people writing those experiences, and also understanding too, right, that it's not. You can't make it black and white. Like if you're a Border Patrol, you're bad, right? I mean, that's. I don't know any world where any reality where things are that cut and dry. And so, you know, which is why my follow-up book is on smugglers. And people are like, well, why the fuck would you decide to write a book about smugglers? And so, well, because they're a crucial part of this whole system. We don't know much about them. What we do know is, I think, is pretty simplistic and stereotypical. And so I want you to know that they're people too, and they do all kinds of fucked up shit, but you have to understand how someone gets stuck in a situation where those are your options. And I would rather write a book that tackles those hard questions, and maybe it fails, but at least it's trying to give us a different kind of perspective. Because I think we need we need to understand more of the parts of this stuff, and including the Border Patrol and including smuggling.
Right. In order to have a really effective solution, because it's not just MS-13 is bad, and anybody who's a pollero or a burrero is bad. I mean, you show like they need to feed their families too, just like the people crossing the border, right? And if somebody, you know, if I'm 15, 14 and I have no prospects, and somebody says, hey, take this across the border, or hey, take these people across the border, you know the route, right? What am I going to do? Am I at 14, 15, am I going to be this principled person, you know, say, no, that's wrong. No, you're not, you know? And it's really the like you said, it's really the black and white thinking. There's a lot of black and white thinking that's really ruining discourse and the effort to find solutions in a wide variety of areas, right? So, I mean, I've written about the MS-13 and because it's such a huge thing in Honduras, and I know people who are gang members here and there, and they didn't choose to be bad. You know, everybody just falls into their life. You fell into what you're doing, and I fell into what I'm doing, right? Mm-hmm. And we're lucky that it's, you know, not bad morally, you know, whatever, but we still struggle with it. What is your take on these kids who join gangs in Honduras and El Salvador?
Well, you know, this book on smugglers, it revolves around the story of this kid, who's 19-year-old kid that I meet, who he's only ever known, you know, that world. He was abandoned by a drug addict mom, living often on the streets for his entire teenage existence, falls into being on the train tracks in Mexico, moving back and forth, smuggling people. Those are his only prospects. And, you know,
and those are his skills. Those are his only skills,
yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Why wouldn't you make money off of your skills, whatever they are?
And those folks, I mean, there's a million of those kids out there.
Yeah.
And, you know, I want people to understand the situations that lead up to someone, because we get these little news bites, and then we go, you know, I read a news article that tries to tell this complex story in like 1,000 words, and you just can't do it. And so I want people to kind of think about all the things that happen before and after someone decides to sort of make this decision. And it's oftentimes not even a decision that you don't have another choice, I think, for a lot of these folks. And of course, you know, they're doing bad things. They're caught up in all kinds of bad shit, but they come from terrible things too. And so, you know, like a lot of the guys I work with had been child soldiers in Honduras. And then, you know, they become assassins and other, you know, stuff later on. And their take is, well, look what I was doing at 9 or 10. What did you think I'd be doing at 19 or 29? You know, there's no kind of other choice.
Yeah.
And I want people to understand that. I think because the way we're coming at it right now with this, like these very simplistic sort of assessments, it just doesn't work, you know. And I think it just keeps us ignorant of this whole thing.
What do you think about? I mean, we'll wrap up in a little bit. I mean, what do you think about? Because I was going to say, you know, obviously, if the American system does not want these immigrants coming, and I think we both would agree that they actually do want them coming. They just want it to make it very hard for them to keep wages down so that they have an exploitable class of people, easily exploitable.
No.
I think that we should have a looser immigration policy. Obviously, keep dangerous people out. Obviously, you know, you're not going to bring in you're bringing in people who want to work, but you have to lift up these countries, right? You have to give the people there a reason to stay there. And as a Honduran, it's a slap in my fucking face that, you know, you see all these migrants coming and the media says like, oh, why are they coming? Why are they coming? Do you know what the term banana republic means? Do you know what the United States has been doing to Honduras for over 100 years, that it's a neo-colony? And you really just have to give people opportunities. And then you look at how the U.S. government treats Mexico, Honduras, El Salvador. It's the way they're treating the south side of Chicago. It's the way they're treating, you know, the Bronx and Harlem and East Los Angeles. It's the same thing. It's all connected. But, I mean, do you ever think as a nation we'll get to that point where enough people see all those dots?
I'm hopeful. I mean, I have to be hopeful.
Yeah.
Because
if you're not hopeful, then you're just going to join them.
Yeah. You know, and I got to like look two little kids in the eyes every day and tell them that things are going to get better, or things are going to be okay. I have been really inspired by this new generation of students and people who are suddenly, you know, young people who are really excited about change. I'm also, you know, I'm okay. I'm happy for some of my colleagues and members of my age cohort who are suddenly becoming woke. I think that's it's never too late to become knowledgeable and engaged. But I am hopeful. Part of what's, you know, I remember in 2016 thinking, well, how bad will it have to get under Trump for things to change? And obviously it keeps getting worse and worse and worse, but we're getting...
I think he's going to win again. I think he's going to win again. I mean, from what I see, I think Biden's doing way better. Hillary was doing better at the same time in 2016 than Biden's doing. And so that just spells disaster.
I'm prepping for the worst. But I also know that, you know, at some point, how many people can you alienate before the system has to do a hard restart? I think we're watching that kind of in real time. But I am hopeful, and and I think I'm naive in that I always imagine, well, if I was a politician, for me it would be very easy.
That's your mistake right there, because if you're a politician, the government would be very different.
But like, I don't understand. I mean, if I was like a capitalist-driven politician, I could see the benefits of helping other countries stabilize. I could, as opposed to making money off of their like vulnerabilities. These greedy people could be making money off of like their productivity as well. I think we need to talk to those people about rethinking the way in which they're imagining capitalism to be functioning. But I don't think, if we keep thinking about these other countries as wholly separate from us, I mean, it's going to become like the book Children of Men, right? Where we're just like these countries where every day is going to look like McAllen, Texas in 2014, from all sides. We are getting to that tipping point, and I hope it doesn't get to that point, but it might, and then that might be what it takes for people to then recognize the interconnectedness of all this stuff.
But you said, how many people can you alienate? But it's like what Piketty says, right? Like, that's one of the major contradictions that I don't want to get into socialism, but that's the huge contradictions of capitalism, right? It leads towards a smaller and smaller group of people that have all the money. So the American economy and American people can benefit by lifting up these countries, right? We're only as good as our neighbors, right? If our neighbor's house burns down, they're going to come to our house asking for stuff. That's natural, especially if we burn down their house,
Yeah.
But two, yeah, they instead of investing in Honduras and lifting up Honduras and El Salvador, they'd rather just pump millions of dollars into these military border security industrial complex, you know, and they're shooting themselves in the foot with it. And again, they have all these degrees. They've been to Harvard and everybody, you know, yada yada yada. They see this, and then after a while you start to think, though they do see it and they really don't care. You know, like there's that line in The Dark Knight. Some people just like to see the world burn.
Yeah. I mean, and they recognize that they can, in their lifetime, they can make a lot of money off of instability.
Right. Short-sighted.
Whereas like an investment in stability, you know, they're not going to be able to make as much money off of that in the long term or in the short term. But it's I mean, it's just a disaster. And I feel so bad. I mean, like Trump has been so terrible for Central America. I mean, and the fucking logic of like, if you don't stop coming to our border, we're going to cut your funding. I'm like, hey, motherfucker, when you cut the funding, that's like that little bit of funding you're giving them, that's helping to keep like a small portion of people there. You remove that, so there's a lot of this just utter stupidity with the policy stuff that boggles my mind. And I really, really feel for Central America right now. I just feel like, you know, we're deporting all these people back, all of the COVID stuff that's happening.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, I mean, there's rumors, you know, my suegro's living with us. He's Mexican. My wife was born in Juarez. The rumors, and they seem to be true, that Mexico's having it the worst of any country, and it's being kept under wraps, that the government's saying that it's some other flu, it's pneumonia. But there's massive numbers of people afflicted with COVID in Mexico, and it's being kept under the rug.
Oh yeah, I'm totally convinced that's what's going on, and it will come out eventually. But you know, we're hiding all this stuff. I mean, we're hiding in the U.S., right? Trump's trying to cook the books here to give off the impression like, oh, our numbers are really good, and it's like, well, no, clearly they're not. So anyone else that's, you know, a country with such less infrastructure like Mexico saying the same thing, you got to be
used to practice in lying to its public about who's dead and who's being afflicted by what.
Yeah. Well, as you said, I mean, we are becoming a Latin American country here.
I mean, I've been reading as a Honduran, you know, I've been reading about Honduras, and it's crazy to see like, oh man, the Democrats and the Republicans are acting like, you know, the Partido Nacional and the Liberal Party back in Honduras. It's holy shit. And then I read the Violent Borders, and that's what a lot of people don't realize. Australia is doing the same thing with its borders, you know. Hungary is doing the same thing. It's happening everywhere, and it's because capitalism is teetering and collapsing. The world is getting hotter. Resources are depleting. There's too many people. And so instead of sharing, it's a crisis, right? It's just a Titanic, right? Everybody's pushing for the last lifeboats. And that's going to lead to more death and despair and misery. And it's crazy how people don't understand that, especially Christians, so-called Christians. I mean, that's your religion. No. Give.
I mean, it's a completely unsustainable approach.
Yeah.
That, you know, it's only going to get worse. And yeah, it's
how you been holding up with the pandemic? I mean, I in the beginning I asked everybody, and now everybody's eating shit in their own way. I know. So, but how you doing? How you holding up?
I mean, I'm fine. I mean, going a little stir crazy, but you know, I'm lucky enough to work from home. You know, I don't really have to go out. I think for us, the biggest struggle with the pandemic was what to do with the kids, trying to keep them occupied. And so I think we've done what a lot of parents have been doing is we've formed a small pod with some families in our neighborhood.
Oh, micro schools they're called them or something like that?
Yeah. We've all signed like a blood oath to not see anybody else, you know, to not go out. And so it is nice that we're able to socialize with two other families, and especially for the kids. I mean, we have a teacher who comes in and teaches them, you know, 9 to 3, and I've never seen them so excited to go to school. I mean, I think after months and months of being cooped up in the house, just being around other kids and having activities to do has been really, it's been really great. Because I mean, like I could just drink more beer, you know, like, all right, what am I gonna do today kind of thing with these kids? Like, you know, you can only color so much by yourself or play Lego so much by yourself. So I feel very lucky that we've been able to do that. But it has been, I think on another level, very bad for my productivity. I think all these people assume like, oh, you get more time at home to do stuff. And I'm like, I can't think straight in this, this whole, this series of.
Well, you get nihilistic, right? You're like, what's the point? That nobody learns. The world's going, I'm trying to make the world better and better through my work, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. I might as well just relax because I'm killing myself. I'm sending myself to an early grave.
Yeah. I mean, and then just like a series of just catastrophes, right? All of the police shootings, all of this election kind of nonsense. It's really, it all starts to add up. But I think, in some ways it's been a good learning experience for me. I mean, I'm super outgoing. I mean, I'm someone who like always wants to go out, always wants to see people, do stuff. And so it's been an interesting exercise to have to stay home for months and months. So I'm trying to, put a good spin on it. I'm exercising like I never have before in my life, and I'm reading a shit ton of books. So
yeah, I'm reading a shit ton of books too. I'm trying to get real zen, trying to become stoic. But let everybody know where they can find you and your work. And when's this book coming out? That looks interesting. That sounds interesting, man.
The book is probably 2 years away. So we're probably thinking end of 2021, early 2022. The new book is called Soldiers and Kings, and that will be out on Viking Press sometime around then. But people are interested in the other stuff.
Is that because of what's his name's book, Cabbage and Kings, that old Honduran book? At the end of,
I didn't. I never made that connection until much later. It was more because all of the smugglers I work with, they refer to them like all the underlings are called soldiers. So there's soldados, and then a lot of the guys I work with, they'll call each other king, right? So mi rey, and so it ended up being a sort of combination of those things.
But the short story guy, O. Henry, right? He wrote that book in, and that's Cabbage and Kings. That's the first. He coined the term "banana republic" and referring to Honduras as a banana republic in Cabbage and Kings. But
so it's a funny kind of thing. I mean, it makes it kind of full circle back around, like, oh, and it's a book about Honduras. That was kind of a
and the other thing I want to say, this might not mean anything coming from me, but it's very important. You're a good writer, man. You're a good writer, which is as in academia, people have a tendency to talk to other academics, be writing for other academics, but you're a good writer, and that you bring the full weight of this of your multiple fields, right? Like ethnography and archaeology, and it made it a really, really enjoyable read. And I was just, I like I said, I tore through it in a couple of days, but it was really enjoyable. And so I look forward to this new book. Where can we find you on social media and stuff like that?
So I'm on Twitter. You can find me at Jason_P_De Leon, one word. Basically just Google me, you'll find all my, I'm on Twitter. I'm on Twitter. Yeah, I'm on Instagram. The book Land of Open Graves you can get from in all versions on Amazon or from UC Press. People who are interested in learning more about the book too can check out Radiolab a couple of years ago did a 3-part series called the Border Trilogy. That's basically the audio version of the book, except with the voices of people that I talk about, including the person that I call Christian. You get to hear his voice at the end of the episode.
Oh wow, I gotta listen to that.
But people can go to our websites, undocumentedmigrationproject.org, and they can learn all about all the stuff there. And I will say the one thing I do want to plug is we have this global exhibition called Hostile Terrain 94 that was supposed to have launched this summer in 130 locations at once. Of course, we've been delayed because of COVID. We've had a few virtual launches and a couple of in-person launches, but next year we'll have over 100 shows across the U.S., across Latin America, basically on 6 continents. And it's a participatory exhibition about migrant death in the Arizona desert. So people are invited to come to an exhibition space and fill out toe tags for those who have died, and then build a wall, construct a map of those deaths and put those tags in the exact location where people have died. They can listen to the audio and see videos of people talking about their stories, including memo. So people can learn about that through our website, hostileterrain94.org. But right now, in the meantime, we're doing a virtual event called A Moment of Global Remembrance, where we're asking 3,200 people around the world to make a 30-second video of themselves, an audio or a video, reading off the information for one person who has died. And so, and we're going to collate it into a 15-hour long video of just people from around the globe in different languages, acknowledging and remembering the dead. So if people are interested in that, you can learn about it more on our website or on our social media. Hostile Terrain on Twitter. You can get tons of information. We would love to get people to participate and also see the other stuff that we've been doing.
Man, it was a real pleasure and an honor talking to you, man. Keep up the work. I know I don't have to tell you that. I mean, you're really driven, and it's really important work. And don't let anybody, as a Honduran, as some, my parents, my mom came here. I mean, this needs to be told, and you're doing the work, and you're showing that these deaths aren't just numbers. These are people's lives. Each person has a life and a family, and it's really important. It's the urge to look away from that and from everything that's going on is powerful, and that's what they want us to do is look away. But we got to, have what Orwell called the power of facing. We got to face it, and I want to thank you, Professor, for coming on, and keep in touch, man. Let me know, and I'm here in Vegas, so let me know if you're ever in town, man.
Yeah, likewise. If you're in LA, once this whole
it won't be a while till I'm in LA because you guys are
yeah.
There's a huge exodus from LA. People are getting out of there.
Yeah. But you're not at the casinos every night.
Oh no. I'm just in my fucking pool like a lizard. Just.
But are they? Because casinos are open, correct?
Yeah, they're open, but they're like 50% capacity, and there's window shields in front of the craps tables and booths around each chair at the slot machines. Vegas did pretty well. Vegas handled it pretty well. I know we had spikes, but considering, I think we did pretty well.
Man, but the last thing I want to do is die because I was partying at Circus, right?
Well, maybe you do. Some people would, man. But take care, man. It's been a real pleasure.
All right. Hey, thank you too.